The letter reached Prince Cael on a Tuesday, and by Thursday the Queen Consort's plan to redirect the late Queen's endowment had collapsed in front of the whole council. That was the part nobody could explain. The letter had described the scheme in detail, the forged codicil, the 2 names bought to witness it, even the hour the papers would be walked into the chancery, and it had reached a man who lived 100 miles from the palace, a man who was not told the color of the drapes when they were changed, let alone the movements of Morwenna's private secretaries. Yet the letter was right. It was right about everything. I know because I was the one ordered to find out how. My name is Wystan Rook, and at the time I was a sergeant of the Royal Guard with 14 years of standing at doors that opened for other people. I had a good record and no ambitions past keeping it. I mention that so you understand I did not go looking for this. It came to me the way trouble always comes to a guardsman, quietly, through a superior who would rather it land on someone else's shoulders. The superior was Captain Bramwell, and he found me in the armory the morning after the council collapsed. He did not sit. Bramwell never sat when he wanted a thing done fast. "You know Prince Cael," he said. It was not a question, but it was not quite true either. Everyone in the house of Harrowgate knew of Prince Cael, the king's second son, the Crown Prince Rowan's younger brother, the one who had left. Some said he had been pushed. Others said he had simply refused to stand in a court that had changed its shape around a new wife. I had guarded the corridor outside his rooms for 3 years before he went, when he was still a boy who thanked the men on duty by name. That was more acquaintance than most had. "I stood his door once," I said, "long ago." "Long enough." Bramwell handed me a folded sheet, and I recognized the weight of good palace paper. "This is a copy. The prince sent the original to the king through his own courier, with a note asking that it be shown to no one who profited from its being hidden. The king read it. Then he handed it to Princess Adela, and Princess Adela handed it to me, and I am handing it to you." I unfolded it. The hand was neat and small and unfamiliar. It laid out in 5 plain paragraphs exactly how a document meant to move a dead woman's fortune had been built out of lies, and it named the day it would be filed. The council had been dissolved before the filing could happen. Somebody had known. Somebody inside the tightest ring of the palace had reached out across the whole kingdom to a disgraced prince and told him the truth. "There have been others," Bramwell said, watching my face. "This is the 4th in half a year. Everyone has been correct. Everyone has undone something the Queen Consort intended before she could finish it. The prince will not say where they come from. He says only that a friend of the truth sends them, and that if the friend is exposed, the friend dies not by sword, he means, but by ruin. Cast out, silenced forever." "Then why look?" I asked. "If the letters are true and they do good, why hunt the one who sends them?" Bramwell's jaw tightened. "Because the Queen Consort is hunting them too. She knows there is a leak in her own house. She has already dismissed 2 chambermaids on suspicion and made their lives a misery over nothing. If she finds the true one first, that person is finished, and worse, the truth stops coming. Princess Adela wants the informant found by someone who will protect them, not punish them. She wants a friend to reach them before an enemy does." He paused. "That is the whole of the order, Rook. Find Prince Cael's informant. Find them before Morwenna does. And when you find them, you shield them. You do not expose them. You bring what you learn to the princess and to no one else." I looked at the letter again. Somewhere behind those 5 calm paragraphs was a person taking a terrible risk, and taking it more than once, for nothing I could see but the truth itself. I have stood a great many posts in my life. That was the first time I was ever ordered to guard someone I had not yet met and could not name. "Where do I begin?" I said. "With the only fact you have," Bramwell said. "Whoever writes these letters knows what happens inside the Queen Consort's private circle. Not the public court, the small, closed world of the people she actually trusts. Her secretaries, her ladies, her son. That is a room of perhaps a dozen souls, and one of them is a traitor to her and a servant of the truth. You are going to walk into that room, Sergeant, and you are going to find out which." He left me holding the letter in the cold armory light. I want to be honest about how the search felt at the start, because it did not feel like the clean thing it became. It felt like betrayal, even though it was the opposite. To find the informant, I had to think like the Queen Consort, to look for a leak, to distrust, to watch good people for the flicker of a secret. I had spent 14 years learning to see nothing that was not my business. Now my business was everyone. The Queen Consort's trusted circle was smaller than the court imagined, and stranger too. At its center sat Morwenna herself, the king's second wife, a woman of enormous stillness who had made stillness a weapon. Around her stood the one she kept close. There was Lord Cassius, her son by an earlier marriage, a smooth and handsome man who ran her errands and smiled at everyone and meant none of it. There was Lady Morwenna, her chief lady of the household, elegant and sharp, who managed the Queen Consort's schedule and her secrets with the same cold efficiency. There were 2 secretaries, a man named Aldous who kept the correspondence, and a younger clerk named Peveril who kept the accounts. There was a steward of the wardrobe, a keeper of the plate, a physician who attended her, and at the very edge of the ring, so far at the edge that I nearly forgot her, a plain, soft-spoken woman named Mistress Oriel, who copied documents. I did not think much of Oriel at first. Nobody did. That, I would learn, was the point. I began where a guardsman is permitted to begin, with the movement of paper. Letters leaving the palace passed through the courier office, and though I could not read a sealed letter, I could learn which hands brought sealed letters to the couriers and on which days. It took me 3 evenings of quiet questions, framed as idle talk, before I had a rough map. 4 times in the past 6 months a letter had gone out to the county where Prince Cael lived, sent not through the ordinary post but slipped into the ordinary post so as not to be noticed. 4 letters, 4 warnings. The dates lined up. But the hand that brought them to the courier was never the same twice. Once it was a laundry-maid, once a groom, once a boy who delivered bread. Whoever wrote those letters never carried them personally. They used strangers, different every time, people who could not be traced back and who did not themselves know what they carried. That was not the carelessness of a frightened chambermaid. That was discipline. That was someone who understood, better than I did, how a palace watches itself. I remember standing in the cold courtyard that 3rd evening, my breath clouding and feeling the shape of my quarry change in my mind. I had been told to look for a leak. A leak is an accident, a weakness, a crack. This was no crack. This was a hand, a steady, patient, deliberate hand, reaching out again and again from inside the most watched circle in the kingdom, and never once leaving a print. Whoever I was hunting was better at this than I was. I brought that first map to Princess Adela, as I had been ordered. She received me in a small study away from the state rooms, a room of maps and old books, and she listened without interrupting, which is rarer in the powerful than you would think. Adela was the king's sister, a straight-backed woman past 50 who had buried a husband and outlived 2 wars of the drawing-room kind, and who had never once, in all the years of Morwenna's rise, pretended to like her. "So it is a person of method," she said when I finished. "Not a servant who overheard something and panicked, someone who plans." "Yes, Your Highness." "That narrows it and widens it both." She tapped the map. "It rules out the frightened, it rules in the clever, and the clever ones in that circle are exactly the ones with the most to lose by crossing her. Cassius, Morwenna, the secretaries. They are not fools who would risk their necks for a dead queen's endowment." She looked up. "Unless one of them is not what they seem, that is what you must find, Sergeant. Not the weakest in that room, the one who is pretending to be small." The phrase stayed with me. The one who is pretending to be small. I did not yet know how exactly she had struck the mark. The Queen Consort found me 2 days later. I had expected to move unseen. I was wrong to. A woman does not survive as Morwenna had survived without knowing when a stranger's eyes have started turning her way, and mine had been turning her circle's way for a week. She had me summoned, not to her at first, but to Lady Morwenna, who was the polished glove over Morwenna's hand, and did the work that a queen could not be seen to do herself. Morwenna received me in an anteroom of the Queen Consort's apartments, all pale silk and cold light. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, and she came straight to it. "You have been asking about couriers, Sergeant Rook," she said. "About who carries what and when. That is an odd hobby for a man who stands doors." "A guard notices movement, my lady," I said. "It is the whole of the trade." "Movement?" She smiled without warmth. "Her Majesty the Queen Consort has also noticed movement. She believes someone in her household has been carrying tales beyond the walls, feeding lies to those who would hurt her. She is very keen to find this person." Morwenna tilted her head. "A man with your talent for noticing might be useful to her. She rewards usefulness. She remembers unhelpfulness even better." There it was, laid on the table between us as plainly as a coin. Morwenna knew there was a leak. Morwenna wanted the leak found. And Morwenna, having noticed me sniffing at her paper trail, had decided to make me her hound rather than let me be someone else's. She did not know I was already someone else's. She thought she had caught me first. I understood in that pale cold room that the game had 2 hunters now and 1 quarry, and that if I did my work in the open, I would simply be leading the wolf to the lamb. Whoever I found, Morwenna would find through me. The princess's order and the Queen Consort's temptation pointed the same way and meant the exact opposite. I had to find the informant, and I had to make sure that Morwenna believed the whole time that I was finding them for her while I made certain she never did. "I am always glad to be useful to the crown, my lady," I said, which was true, and let her take it however she liked. She took it as a yes. That was the beginning of the double game. I left Morwenna's anteroom knowing 3 things I had not known that morning. First, that Morwenna suspected her leak came from close by, which meant my instinct about the trusted circle was hers too. Second, that she had chosen Morwenna to manage me, which either meant Morwenna was above suspicion in her mind, or that Morwenna was being tested by being given the task. And third, that I now had a cover. As the Queen Consort's own investigator, I could ask questions in that closed circle that no ordinary sergeant could ask. I could walk into the room I most needed to walk into. I just had to remember, every single moment, whose side I was truly on, and never once let it show on my face, which is a thing a guardsman is at least well trained to do. That night I could not sleep. I lay in my narrow bunk and turned the dozen faces of the circle over in my mind like cards. Cassius, the smiling son, too fond of his mother's power to imperil it. Morwenna, the cold blade, too invested in her own position to gamble it on mercy. Aldous, the correspondence clerk, gray and careful, a man who had served 3 households and survived them all by never having an opinion. Peveril, the accounts clerk, young and hungry and watchful. And the others, the wardrobe and the plate and the physician and the copyist. The people the court did not bother to name, because they held nothing but their own small skills. I kept coming back without knowing why to the courier map. 4 letters, 4 different carriers, each one a stranger to the last. To arrange that, you needed to be someone who could reach a laundry maid and a groom and a bread boy without any of them thinking it strange. Someone who moved through every part of the palace unremarked, whose comings and goings raised no eyebrow anywhere. The great ones of the circle could not do that. Lord Cassius could not hand a letter to a laundry maid, without the whole laundry talking of it for a week. Lady Morwenna could not walk to the kitchens, without 3 people noting the hour. But there are people in a palace who are invisible precisely because they are everywhere. The ones who carry papers between offices, the ones who fetch and copy and return, the ones whose whole function is to move quietly from room to room, seen by all and noticed by none. I did not have a name yet, but for the first time I had a shape, and the shape was small and quiet and easy to overlook. The next morning I began my work as the Queen Consort's hound, and I hated it more than I have hated any duty before or since. Morwenna gave me the run of the circle in Morwenna's name. I could summon any of them, question any of them, examine the ledgers of who went where. I understood the danger at once. Every question I asked was a question the Queen Consort could hear about later, and every person I lingered over was a person I might be painting a target upon. So I made a rule for myself, standing in the gray dawn before I started. I would ask about everyone. I would linger on no one. I would cast my net so wide and so evenly that Morwenna would learn nothing from where I looked, because I would look everywhere the same. If I began to suspect, I would hide the suspicion under a dozen false ones. I would guard my true quarry by pretending to hunt the whole flock. I started with the ones the Queen Consort would expect me to start with, because a hound that ignores the obvious rouses the master. I questioned the two dismissed chambermaids first. The poor women Morwenna had already ruined on a suspicion. They knew nothing. They had never known anything. They wept, and one of them asked me if I could get her position back, and I could not, and I carried that out of the room like a stone in my boot. Whoever the true informant was, they had let these two women suffer for their secret. That troubled me at first. Later I understood it differently. The true informant had not chosen those women's ruin. Morwenna had. The informant had simply been unable to save everyone, and had kept sending the truth anyway, because the truth would save more. I moved up the circle. I questioned Peveril, the young accounts clerk, and found him exactly as ambitious as he looked, a man who wanted Morwenna's favor too badly to ever risk it. I questioned Aldous, the old correspondence clerk, and found a man so cautious he seemed to have sanded every edge off his own soul. He answered every question with another question and gave me nothing, but it was the nothing of a man who had survived by giving nothing, not the nothing of a man with a secret. I questioned the wardrobe steward and the keeper of the plate and the physician, and each of them was precisely what they appeared to be, small people guarding small territories. And I questioned Lord Cassius, which I did carefully, because a queen's son can end a sergeant's career with a shrug. Cassius received me lounging, a glass of something pale in his hand though the hour was early, and he made a performance of being amused that a guard should question him at all. "Mother's little bloodhound," he said, smiling. "She does love a hunt. Ask your questions, Sergeant. I have nothing to hide from a man in a red coat." He was lying, of course. Everyone in that circle had something to hide, but what Cassius was hiding, I soon saw, was only himself, his idleness, his debts, his contempt for the mother whose power he lived on. He had no love of the truth. He would not have crossed a room for it, let alone crossed his mother. He was a peacock, and peacocks do not spy for dead queens. I crossed him off in my mind before I had finished my third question. That left me with the two I could not yet read. Morwenna, and the wide gray sea of the truly invisible, the copyists and messengers and under clerks whose names the court never learned. Morwenna was the hardest, because Morwenna was clever enough to be the informant and cold enough to hide it, and because I could not question her the way I questioned the others. She was my handler, not my quarry. Morwenna had set her over me, so I watched her instead. I watched her the way I had spent 14 years watching corridors, seeing everything and betraying nothing. And what I saw over the following days was a woman entirely devoted to the Queen Consort's power because her own was bolted to it. Morwenna's whole life was Morwenna's favor. Every ledger she kept, every schedule she guarded, was aimed at making the Queen Consort's will run smoother through the household. She did not love Morwenna, but she loved what Morwenna's rise had lifted her to, and she would no more feed the truth to Prince Cael than she would set fire to her own rooms. If the informant was a great one of the circle, it was not Morwenna. Which meant, if my instinct held, that it was one of the small ones. And the small ones were many, and they left almost no trace, and to hunt them I would have to become a different kind of investigator entirely. The midpoint of the whole affair, the moment the game changed under my feet, came in the second week, and it came from Morwenna herself. She summoned me, not through Morwenna this time, to her. I had never before stood alone in the Queen Consort's presence, and I will tell you it is a thing that works on a man's nerve even when his conscience is clean. And mine was not clean, for I was her false hound. She sat by a tall window in a room of white and gold, and she did not rise, and she let the silence stretch until I understood that the silence was the first thing she wanted me to feel. "You have questioned my household," she said at last. Her voice was low and even. "You have questioned my son. You have looked at my ledgers and my couriers. Tell me what you have found, Sergeant Rook." "Little yet, Majesty," I said. "A household of loyal servants and no clear traitor. These things take time." "Time?" She turned the word over as if tasting it. "You should understand something about time, Sergeant. Every day this person breathes free in my house is a day they carry my affairs to my enemies. My late husband's second son, a bitter, disloyal boy who fled his own father's court, has been receiving letters, poisoned letters, lies dressed as warnings. Someone I feed and clothe and trust is writing them." Her eyes came to mine, and they were very steady and very cold. "I will find that person, with your help or without it. And when I find them, I will not merely dismiss them. I will make an example so complete that no servant in this kingdom will ever again imagine that the truth of my house is theirs to carry. Do you understand me?" "I understand, Majesty," I said, and I did better than she knew. She had just told me the stakes plainly. This was not a matter of a lost position. Whoever I found, if Morwenna found them through me, would be destroyed root and branch, turned out, blackened, made a warning to a whole class of quiet people who kept a whole kingdom running. And she would take her time about it and enjoy it. "There is one thing more," Morwenna said, and here the game turned. "The letters describe things known only to a handful, my true circle. That means the traitor is close, closer than the maids you have been wasting your time upon. I want you to look among the ones I trust. Look at Verena, look at Aldous, look even at Cassius if you must. I am not sentimental. And look at the small ones, the copyists, the messengers. I have come to think it may be one of them precisely because we think of them as furniture." She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I ever saw. "No one guards their tongue in front of furniture, Sergeant. That is the flaw in a great house. The people we do not see everything." I kept my face a door. Inside, something had gone very still and very cold, because Morwenna had just walked, in 3 sentences, to the exact place my own hunt had been walking for a week. The one who is pretending to be small. The people we do not see everything. The princess had said it one way and the Queen Consort had said it another, and both of them had said the same thing, and it was true, and it meant that Morwenna was perhaps only days behind me on the same trail. The game had changed. It was no longer a hunt, it was a race. I left her presence and went straight to a cold stairwell and stood there a while getting my breath, because for the first time I felt the full weight of what I had been ordered to do. Somewhere in that house was a person who had risked everything, again and again, for nothing but the truth, and 2 hunters were closing on them at once, and one of the hunters meant to protect them, and one meant to destroy them, and the person did not know that either hunter existed. If I moved too slow, Morwenna reached them first. If I moved too fast and clumsy, I painted their name in the very air the Queen Consort was breathing. I had to be faster than Morwenna and quieter than Morwenna at the same time, and Morwenna had spies I did not have, and time I did not have, and a lifetime of practice at exactly this. I went back to the courier map, because it was the one hard thing I had, and I made myself look at it the way Morwenna had taught me to look at the furniture. Who could hand a letter to a laundry maid 1 week, and a groom the next, and a bread boy the week after, and be seen doing it by no one who thought it worth remembering? Who moved through the laundry and the stables and the kitchens and the offices all alike, so that their presence anywhere raised no question at all? A copyist. A copyist carries documents between every office in the palace. A copyist walks into the correspondence room and the accounts room and the steward's room and back, all day, with papers in their hands. That is the whole of the work. A copyist has a reason to be anywhere there is paper, and there is paper everywhere. A copyist could pass through the laundry court on the way from one office to another and hand a folded sheet to a maid with a coin and a smile, and not one soul would think it strange, because copyists carry papers. That is what they are for. There were 3 copyists attached to the Queen Consort's circle. 2 were young men who had come in the last year. The third was a woman of middle age named Mistress Oriel, who had copied the household's documents for longer than anyone quite remembered, so long that she had become, exactly as Morwenna said, a piece of the furniture. She was quiet. She was plain. She was unfailingly, invisibly present. When I tried to recall anything anyone had ever said about her, I could recall nothing at all, and that nothing rang in me suddenly like a struck bell. I did not go to Oriel. Not yet. Going to her was the one thing I could not do carelessly, because Morwenna was watching where I went. Instead, I did the slow, patient, secret work, the work I could do without pointing a single finger. I learned Oriel's history without letting anyone know I was learning it. I asked in the idlest possible way, spread across a dozen conversations, so no one could see the shape of my question, who Mistress Oriel had been before she copied papers for the Queen Consort's household. The answer, when I finally had it, stopped me cold in the corridor. Mistress Oriel had once served, long ago, in the household of the late Queen Isolde. I had to lean against the cold stone a moment and let that settle. Queen Isolde, the king's first wife, Rowan and Cael's own mother, dead these many years, the woman whose endowment and jewels and legacy Morwenna had been quietly working to redirect ever since. The letters to Prince Cael had all, in one way or another, defended Isolde's legacy against Morwenna's schemes. And the copyist at the very edge of Morwenna's circle, the invisible woman with paper always in her hands, had once been Isolde's own servant. It was not proof. 100 people had passed through the old queen's household over the years, and many had gone on to serve elsewhere. There was nothing strange in a copyist finding a place in the new establishment after the old one was dissolved. But it was a thread, and it was the first thread that ran from the informant's method to a possible reason. Method and motive, the 2 halves of any true finding. Oriel had the position to send the letters unseen. And Oriel, perhaps, had the one reason in all that cold circle to want the late queen's legacy defended, because she had loved the late queen, or served her, or owed her, in a time before Morwenna's shadow fell across the house. I brought it to Princess Adela that same night, and I brought it carefully, because even my visits to the princess had to be disguised now. Morwenna's eyes were everywhere, and a sergeant seen too often at the king's sister's door would be a sergeant explaining himself before long. I came the back way, through the old servants' passages I had learned in 14 years of walking them, and I laid it all before her. The courier map, the copyist's invisibility, the thread back to Isolde. Adela heard me out with her hands folded. When I finished, she was quiet a long moment. "You believe it is this woman, Oriel?" "I believe she is the likeliest, Your Highness. She has the reach to send the letters unseen, and she has a reason no one else in that circle has, but I have no proof. I have never once seen her carry a letter to a courier. I have never seen her write anything but the copies she is paid to write. If I accuse her and I am wrong, I have ruined an innocent woman. And if I accuse her and I am right, and I do it clumsily, I have handed the Queen Consort the very name she is hunting for." I paused. "I must be certain before I move. And I must reach the woman before Morwenna does, to warn her and shield her, not to expose her." "Then how will you be certain?" Adela asked. "You cannot follow her every hour. You cannot read her mind." I had been turning that over the whole way through the dark passages, and I had one answer, and I did not much like it. "There is only one way to be sure the sender of the letters is who I think," I said. "I must catch a letter in the sending. I must be watching unseen, at the moment she passes the next warning out of the palace. If I see her hand it over, the copyist, to a stranger, folded in secret, then I will know beyond doubt, and I can go to her privately before Morwenna's people ever suspect. And if there is no next letter—" "There will be," I said, because the Queen Consort has not stopped scheming. As long as Morwenna moves against the late Queen's legacy, the informant will move to stop her. All I need is to know when Morwenna's next move comes, and to be watching the copyist when the warning goes out. Adela's mouth curved just slightly. As it happens, she said, I can help you there. My brother the king does not tell me all his affairs, but I hear things. Morwenna has been pressing him again over the late Queen Isolde's jewels this time. There is to be an inventory of the vault in 9 days, and I am told the Queen Consort intends to have certain of Isolde's pieces reclassified as household property before that inventory, so that they pass quietly into her own keeping instead of to the late Queen's sons. The papers to do it are being drawn up now, in her private circle, on her desks. 9 days. If Adela was right, then in the days before that inventory, Morwenna's forgers would be at work, and if my copyist was the informant, she would see the papers, and she would send the warning, and she would send it before the inventory could seal the theft. All I had to do was be watching in the right place at the right hour. I will need to know the moment those papers begin to move, I said. You will know, Adela said. I will see to it. I left her with the first solid hope I had felt in 2 weeks. It did not last the night. Because the trouble with a race is that you are not the only runner, and Morwenna, it turned out, had not been idle while I crept through servants' passages. The very next morning I learned that the Queen Consort had brought a new man into the palace, a lean, watchful person named Doran, whom no one could quite place, who wore no livery and held no named office, and yet moved through the household as if he owned it. It did not take me long to learn his trade. Doran was a hunter of the same quarry I hunted. Morwenna, impatient with her slow, red-coated hound, had hired herself a wolf. And Doran was good. Within 3 days he had done what I had spent 2 weeks doing, narrowed the circle, dismissed the great ones, turned his cold attention to the small. I saw him in the copying room. I saw him lingering by the courier's office. I saw him, once, watching Mistress Oriel from across a courtyard, with the flat, patient look of a man who has found a scent, and is only waiting to be sure. That was the false dawn of the whole affair, and it was the worst hour of it, because it looked for a moment as if I had already lost. Doran was ahead of me now, or level with me, and Doran answered to Morwenna, and if Doran reached the certainty I was still reaching for, then Oriel was finished before I could ever warn her. I had let myself believe the race was mine to run at my own pace. It was not. There were 3 of us now on the same narrow trail, the copyist ahead, unknowing, myself behind her, meaning to save her, and Doran beside me, meaning to end her. And Doran did not have to be careful. Doran did not have to hide his hunt from the Queen Consort, because the Queen Consort was his hunt. He could move in the open. He could move fast. I stood in the copying room doorway that afternoon and made myself look properly at the woman I had spent 2 weeks circling and never once approached. Mistress Oriel sat at her sloped desk with her pen moving in small, even strokes, copying some dull household schedule, her head bent, her plain gray dress catching the light. She was perhaps 50. Her hair was going silver at the temples and pinned back without vanity. Her hands were the only remarkable thing about her, long, careful, tireless hands that had spent a lifetime turning other people's words into fair copies. She did not look up when I passed. She had made a life's art of not being looked at, and it had worked so well that a wolf and a hound had both been in her house for weeks before either of us thought to look at her at all. I could not warn her yet. I did not dare. Doran was watching, and if I went to Oriel now, a red-coated sergeant, sitting down beside the copyist for a quiet word, Doran would see it, and Doran would know exactly what it meant, and I would have pointed the wolf at the lamb with my own hand. To save her, I had to do the hardest thing a guardsman ever does, which is nothing. I had to wait. I had to let her sit unwarned in her danger and trust that I could be there at the one moment that mattered. That night, I did something I had not done in years. I went to the palace chapel, empty and cold at that hour, and I sat in the dark and thought about the woman with the tireless hands. I did not yet know why she did it. I did not know what Isolde had been to her, or what price she had already paid, or what she had decided in her own heart to accept. But I knew this much. She had been sending the truth out into the dark for half a year, alone, expecting no thanks and no rescue, knowing that discovery meant ruin, and she had done it anyway. Whatever she was braver than the whole shining circle she copied papers for. And I was the only friend she had in that house, and she did not even know I existed. I resolved two things in that cold chapel. The first was that I would not fail her. The second was that when this was done, however it ended, the court would learn her name and would honor it, and would never again call her furniture. The message from Princess Adela came on the 6th day. It was a single line carried by a page who did not know what he carried. The papers move tomorrow. Isolde's pieces. Watch your quarry. Tomorrow, Morwenna's forged reclassification of the late Queen's jewels was being walked through her private circle tomorrow, ahead of the vault inventory. If Oriel was the informant, she would see it tomorrow, and she would send her warning to Prince Cael tomorrow or the day after, before the inventory sealed the theft. And Doran, who had been watching Oriel for days, would surely be watching her tomorrow too. I did not sleep at all that night. I lay in my bunk and built the next day in my mind, hour by hour, the way I had once been taught to build a defense of a gate. I knew the copying room. I knew the courier's office and the laundry court and the 3 ways between them. I knew where a man could stand and see without being seen. And I knew that somewhere in the coming day, a plain woman with tireless hands would fold a piece of the truth into an ordinary letter and pass it out of the palace, and that a wolf and a friend would both be watching, and only one of us could reach her first. The day came gray and cold. I took my post before dawn. I had chosen my ground carefully. There is a gallery above the copying room, a narrow railed walk used by no one but the men who trim the high lamps, and from it a patient watcher can see the whole floor below through the balustrade without being seen himself. I went up before the household stirred, and I settled in to wait, and I made myself into the thing I had spent 14 years learning to be, a man who does not move, does not speak, does not break. Only this time the stillness was not a post. It was a hunt, and the thing I hunted was the chance to save a life. Below me, the day began. The copyists came in and took their desks. The 2 young men and last, Mistress Oriel, who unpinned her cuffs and set out her pens and bent her head and began to work as she had begun to work 10,000 mornings before. She did not look up. She did not look about. She simply worked, and the ordinariness of her was so complete that twice I had to remind myself why I was there. The forged papers came into the circle at mid-morning. I did not see them come, but I saw the effect of them, a quickening in the room below, a summons that took the 2 young copyists out and left Oriel alone at her desk for a stretch, and then a bundle of documents brought in by a clerk I recognized as Aldous' man and set down at the head copyist's station for fair copying. Household business to any eye. But I had learned in 2 weeks to read the traffic of that circle, and I knew the weight of what had just come into the room. Somewhere in that bundle was the paper that would turn the late Queen Isolde's jewels into Morwenna's household plate. And it had come to the copying room. Of course it had. A forged reclassification must be copied fair before it can be filed, copied by the very hands the Queen Consort trusted. Morwenna had, without ever dreaming it, been handing her secret schemes to her own informant to copy, morning after morning for half a year. That was how Oriel knew. That was how she had always known. She did not have to spy or eavesdrop or steal. The truth was brought to her desk to be written out fair, and she wrote it out fair. And then she wrote it out once more, in a small neat hand, and sent that second copy into the dark. I understood it all in that gallery, watching, and I felt a kind of awe I have felt for very few things in my life. She had not broken a single rule of her office. She had done exactly the work she was paid to do. She had simply, quietly, refused to let the truth die inside the room it was written in. Now I had to catch her doing the second thing. The morning wore on. The other copyists returned. Oriel worked through the bundle with the rest, her pen moving in its small, even strokes, and I watched her hands and I could not tell, I swear I could not tell, which of the papers before her was the forgery. So smooth and unhurried was she over all of them alike. If I had not known, I would never have guessed that anything in that room was other than dull. And then, a little after noon, I saw Doran. He came into the gallery below by the far door, and my whole body went cold, because he had chosen the same instinct I had to watch from above and behind. He did not see me. The gallery turns, and I was in the shadow of a pillar past the bend, and he had eyes only for the floor below. But he was there, and he was watching Oriel, and the flat patience had gone out of his face and been replaced by something sharper. He had seen the same quickening I had seen. He knew the forged papers had come to the room. He knew that if the copyist was his quarry, this was the day the warning would go out, and he had come up to watch her do it. We stood, the two of us, 30 feet apart in that high gallery, both watching the same bent gray head, and neither of us knowing the other was there, and the distance between the woman's ruin and her rescue narrowed to the width of whichever of us moved first. The letter went out at the changing of the noon watch. I nearly missed it, and Doran, I think, missed it entirely, because it was so perfectly ordinary. Oriel finished a copy, blotted it, and rose to carry a small stack of completed work to the correspondence office, exactly as any copyist does a dozen times a day. She gathered her papers. She went out the low door, and that was all. That was the whole of it, a copyist carrying papers between offices, the most invisible act in the entire palace. But I had spent 2 weeks learning her route, and I knew that the way to the correspondence office does not pass the laundry court, and Oriel turned toward the laundry court. I was down the gallery stair, and after her before I had decided to be, moving fast and quiet the way you learn to move in a palace where noise is a kind of sin. I came out into the covered walk above the laundry court, and I looked down, and I saw it, the whole of it, in 3 seconds, the thing I had waited 2 weeks to see. Mistress Oriel stood at the edge of the laundry court, and she was speaking to a carter's boy, a lad who had brought in a load of pressed linens and was loading his empty baskets to leave. She said something to him, and she smiled, and she pressed a coin into his hand, and folded inside a bundle of clean linen she gave him to carry out. I saw the pale corner of it was a letter, a folded sheet, passed not by hand to hand where any eye could catch it, but tucked into the ordinary traffic of the palace, into a load of laundry going out the tradesman's gate, to be carried beyond the walls by a boy who would never know what he had carried. I had my proof, beyond any doubt now, beyond any need for more. The copyist was the informant. The furniture had a soul, and the soul had a courage that shamed the whole gilded circle above her. And in the same instant, cold in my chest, I understood that if I had seen it, so might Doran. I did not look back to check. There was no time. Doran was somewhere behind me, and if he had followed as I had followed, then he had seen what I had seen, and he was already on his way to the Queen Consort with a name. My whole purpose now collapsed into a single race, to reach Oriel and get her safe before Doran reached Morwenna and got her ruined. The proof I had spent 2 weeks earning was no longer the prize. The woman was the prize. Everything now was to reach her first. The carter's boy went out the tradesman's gate with his linen and his coin and his letter. Oriel turned to go back to the copying room, calm as still water, her work of the day done, and the truth of it already beyond the walls. She had no idea she had been seen. She had no idea 2 hunters had been in her house for weeks. She was walking back to her desk to finish her ordinary day, and she was, at that moment, the most endangered person in the kingdom. I stepped out of the covered walk into her path. She stopped. She looked up at me, a red-coated sergeant, blocking her way, which was a thing that had surely never happened to her in all her invisible years. And I watched the calm on her face flicker, just once, into fear, and then close over again into the practiced blankness of a servant who has learned that the safest face is no face at all. "Sergeant," she said, her voice was low and even and gave away nothing. "Am I in your way?" "I have papers to return." "Mistress Oriel," I said, keeping my own voice down, keeping it gentle, because I could see how frightened she was under the stillness and I did not want to add a grain to it. "My name is Wystan Rook. I need you to listen to me quickly, and I need you to trust me, and I know I have given you no reason to. But there is a man in this house today who means you great harm, and I mean you none, and you must come with me now quietly before he finds his master." The blankness held for one more breath. Then it broke not into panic, but into a kind of weary understanding, as if she had always known this moment would come and had only wondered which day it would be. "So," she said softly, "it's found out then. I always thought it would be the young one who caught me, not a guard." She looked at me with those steady, tired eyes. "You've been sent by her, by the Queen Consort, to bring me to her." "No," I said. "I have been sent by the one who wants you saved. But there is very little time, mistress, and the other one, hers, has been watching you too, and I think he has seen what I saw. Please, walk with me. I will explain everything, and I will not let her have you, but we must go now." For a moment she did not move, and I saw the whole weight of her half a year of secret courage sitting in her face, and the exhaustion of it, and the strange relief that the hiding might at last be over one way or another. Then she made a small decision that I have honored in my heart ever since. She trusted me. A frightened, invisible woman, hunted through her own house, looked into the face of an armed stranger who had just told her he knew her secret, and she chose, against every reason, to believe that he was a friend. "All right," she said, "Wystan Rook, I will walk with you." And I took her, not to Morwenna, and not out through any gate where a wolf might be waiting, but along the old servants' passages I knew and no one else remembered, toward the one place in the whole palace where the Queen Consort's reach did not run, the back study of Princess Adela, the king's own sister, where the truth she had been sending into the dark for half a year could at last be spoken aloud, in safety, to someone with the power to make it matter. Behind us, somewhere, Doran was going to his mistress with a name. I did not know how far ahead of him we were. I only knew we could not stop. Princess Adela was in her study when I brought Oriel through the last low door, and to her lasting credit she did not waste a single breath on surprise. She took one look at the two of us, a sergeant out of breath and a gray copyist white-faced with fear, and she understood the whole of it, and she rose and put a chair for the woman with her own hands, which is a thing I had never seen a royal do for a servant, and said only, "You are safe in this room. No one enters it but by my leave. Sit, mistress, and take your breath, and tell me who you are." And Oriel, in that safe room, with a princess of the blood telling her she was safe, finally let the half-year of hiding fall away, and told us. She had served the late Queen Isolde, not as a great lady, as a copyist, then as now, one of the quiet ones who kept the Queen's papers fair. But Isolde, she said, had been the sort of mistress who learned the names of her furniture. In the last years of the old Queen's life, when illness had come and the court had begun already to turn its face toward the King's new favorite, it was Oriel who sat with her and copied out her wishes and her letters, and Oriel to whom, near the end, Isolde had said a thing she had never forgotten. She knew what would come, Oriel said, her steady hands folded in her lap. She knew that when she was gone there would be those who would try to unmake her, to take what she had set aside for her sons, to blot out what she had built, to write her out of the house as if she had never been. And she was too proud to beg the court to protect her memory. But she said to me once near the end, "Oriel, you will still be here when I am gone. You see everything and no one sees you. If ever they try to steal what is not theirs, be my witness. Do not let it happen in silence." Oriel's voice did not break, but her eyes shone. I gave her my word. It was the last promise I ever made to her, and she was the only great person in my life who ever thought my word was worth the having. So when the new queen began, this past year, to move against the old queen's legacy, the endowment, the codicil, the jewels, and the papers to do it came to my desk to be copied fair, I remembered my promise. I could not stop her. A copyist stops nothing. But I could bear witness. I could send the truth to someone who might stop her. And the only one who would fight for the late queen's sons was the son who had been driven out, Prince Cael, who loved his mother and had no reason left to love this court. So I sent it to him, 4 times, and I would have sent it 400 until she was stopped or I was caught. The room was very quiet when she finished. Princess Adela stood with her back very straight and her face working, and when she spoke her voice was rough. "You have done more for the honor of this house," she said, "than every lord who bows in its halls, and you have done it alone and unthanked and in fear. That ends today." She turned to me. "Sergeant, the papers she copied this morning, the reclassification of my sister-in-law's jewels, where are they now?" "Being finished for filing, Your Highness. The inventory is in 3 days. Once Isolde's pieces are reclassified as household property before the Count, they pass quietly to the Queen Consort and no one can say a theft was ever done. The paper is the whole of the crime. If the paper stands, the crime is lawful. If the paper falls... If the paper falls, the crime is naked," Adela finished. "Then we must have the paper. Not the copy Mistress Oriel sent the prince, the original forgery itself, in the Queen Consort's own circle before it is filed. With that in the king's hand and this woman's testimony beside it, my brother cannot look away." Her eyes sharpened. "But you said there is a hunter. Hers." "Doran," I said, "and I believe he saw what I saw at the laundry court. If he did, then he is with the Queen Consort now, or will be within the hour, and he is telling her that her leak is her copyist. The moment Morwenna has that name, she will move to seize Mistress Oriel, to destroy the letters, to file the forgery today instead of in 3 days and be done before anyone can act. We have perhaps an hour. Perhaps less." That was the setback that could have undone everything, and I will not pretend I saw the answer at once. For a moment the 3 of us stood in that safe study while the whole thing balanced on a knife. The witness safe but the proof still in the enemy's hand, the enemy warned, the clock running. If we hid Oriel, we lost the paper. If we chased the paper, we risked Oriel. And Morwenna, once she understood she was found out, would burn the forgery to ash sooner than let it reach the king, and swear on her crown that no such document had ever existed, and it would be a princess and a copyist's word against a queen's. It was the princess who cut the knot, and she cut it like her brother's sister. "Then we do not give her the hour," Adela said. "We do not creep, Sergeant. We do not out-scheme her at her own game. She is better at it than we are, and she has had years of practice. We do the one thing she will not expect from people who have caught her. We go straight to the king now in the open before she can arrange the room. She thinks she has time to prepare her lies. We take the time from her." She was already moving, gathering a cloak. "My brother is in the state apartments this hour. Mistress Oriel comes with us. I will not leave her behind these walls a single minute more. And you, Sergeant, will do what you were made to do. You will get us there, through whatever she puts in our way, and you will stand between this woman and anyone who reaches for her. Can you do that?" "To the last, Your Highness," I said, and I meant it in my bones. We went out into the palace 3 abreast. A princess with her chin up, a copyist white but walking steady, and a sergeant with his hand near his sword and his eyes on every doorway. And we had not gone 2 galleries before we learned how right I had been about the hour, because the Queen Consort's people were already moving. They met us at the head of the long gallery that runs to the state apartments, Lady Verena first, cold and quick, with 2 of the household guard behind her who took their pay from Morwenna's purse and not the king's, and behind them at a little distance, the lean shape of Doran. Verena had been sent to head us off, and she did it smoothly, stepping into our path with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your Highness," she said to Adela, dropping the smallest possible courtesy, "the Queen Consort has heard there is some disturbance among the household staff. She asks that the copyist Oriel be brought to her at once to answer certain questions. A household matter, nothing to trouble yourself with. Her gaze slid to Oriel and there was ice in it. The woman will come with me. The woman, said Princess Adela, in a voice I had never heard from her, a voice with the whole weight of her blood in it, is under my protection and is on her way to the king. Stand aside, Verena. I cannot, your highness, Verena said, and the two guards behind her shifted their feet. The Queen Consort was most particular. And there it was, the moment the whole affair had been building toward, laid out plain in a palace gallery. A princess of the blood and a Queen Consort's creature, and between them a plain copyist who had done nothing but keep a promise to a dead woman, and around them men with weapons deciding whose word was law. I understood that in the next few seconds the thing would be settled one way or the other, by nerve or by force, and that the princess could command all she liked, but that a princess is not a wall, and if those two guards laid hands on Oriel to drag her to Morwenna, someone had to be the wall. I stepped forward, and I put myself between Mistress Oriel and every one of them, and I did the thing a royal guard is for. This woman is going to the king, I said, and I kept my voice level, because a raised voice is a frightened voice, and I was not going to be frightened where Oriel could hear it. By the order of Princess Adela, sister to His Majesty, any man who lays a hand on her lays it against the crown itself, and will answer to the king for it before this day is out, not to the Queen Consort. Choose carefully whose livery you pour in. The two household guards hesitated. That hesitation was everything. They were Morwenna's men, but they were not fools, and they had just been reminded that a Queen Consort is not a king, and that the man in front of them was speaking the king's own sister's name, and that whatever the Queen Consort had promised them, it was the king who hanged people. Verena saw the hesitation and her smooth face tightened, because she saw, as I saw, that her authority ran only as far as the men behind her believed in it, and they had just stopped believing. You forget yourself, Sergeant, Verena said, but there was a crack in it now. No, my lady, I said. For the first time in a fortnight I remember myself exactly. I am a royal guard. I do not serve the schemer in the house. I serve the crown, and the crown says this woman walks free to the king. Now stand aside, or send your man Doran to explain to His Majesty why a copyist's testimony frightened the Queen Consort so badly that she set armed men in a princess's path to stop it being heard. That was the line that broke it, because it named the fear. If Morwenna had nothing to hide, why the guards, why the haste, why Doran? The very act of trying to stop us was itself a confession, and Verena, clever Verena, who understood these balances better than anyone in that gallery, knew that every second she stood in our way she was proving our case for us. She looked at me, and she looked at the wavering guards, and she looked at Princess Adela's iron face, and she made the coldest and cleverest choice available to her, which was to step out of the way and preserve herself. On your own head, Sergeant, she said quietly and moved aside. We went past them. Doran did not try to stop us. A hired wolf does not fling himself on a princess for a mistress who is about to lose. And so the three of us walked the last gallery to the state apartments unhindered, and I felt Mistress Oriel step steady beside me, and I heard her let out a long breath she had perhaps been holding for half a year, and Princess Adela pushed open the doors of the king's presence chamber with her own two hands, and we went in to lay the whole truth at the feet of the king. King Alaric was not a young man, and the years and the losses had marked him, but he was every inch a king when he rose from his chair, and saw his sister come through his doors uninvited with a guard and a stranger at her side. He knew Adela did not do such things for small reasons. Sister, he said, what is this? Justice, brother, if you will have it, Adela said, and a debt of honor you did not know you owed. Sit and hear this woman, and hear this man, and then judge for yourself whether I was right to bring them past your Queen Consort's guards to reach you. That word guards landed in the room like a stone in still water. The king's eyes went sharp, past her guards. "She set armed men in my path not 10 minutes ago," Adela said, "to stop this copyist reaching your ear. Ask yourself why a queen fears a copyist, and you will already be halfway to the truth." The king sat, and there in the great cold state chamber, the whole of it was laid before him. Princess Adela spoke first, plainly, of the letters that had reached Prince Cael, and of how the king himself had ordered them investigated, and of what the investigation had found. Then she bid me speak, and I told it as a guardsman tells a report, the courier map, the invisible copyist, the thread back to the late Queen Isolde, the day I watched the letter go out folded in a load of laundry, all of it. And then when the king's face had gone very still, Princess Adela turned to Mistress Oriel and said, gently, "Now you, tell the king what you told me. Tell him about your promise." And Oriel, who had spent 30 years being furniture, stood before her sovereign and told him about the last words of his first wife. She did not weep and she did not falter. She told it simply, how Isolde had known she was dying, how she had known the court would turn, how she had asked her invisible copyist to be her witness if ever the wolves came for what she had left her sons. She told him of her promise. She told him of the papers that came to her desk to be copied fair, the endowment, the codicil, and now the jewels, and how she could not stop them but could bear witness to them and had. When she finished, she reached into her plain gray dress and drew out one last folded sheet, the newest copy, the one she had made that very morning before the original was sent out in the linen, and she laid it in the king's hands. "That is the truth of the reclassification meant to take the late queen's jewels before your inventory, Majesty," she said. "I copied the false paper, and then I copied it true, so that if I were caught, the proof would not die with me. The original is being finished for filing even now in the Queen Consort's own circle. If it is filed, the theft is lawful. It has not yet been filed. There is still time to stop it if your Majesty wishes to." The king read the sheet. He read it twice, and I watched a thing happen in his face that I had never expected to see there, the slow, terrible understanding of a man who has spent years choosing not to see, finally letting himself look. He had loved Isolde once. Whatever had come after, whatever the second marriage had made of his court, he had loved his first wife, and here in his hands was proof that her memory and her son's inheritance were being quietly butchered under his own roof by the woman who had taken her place, and that the only soul in all his palace to lift a hand against it had been a copyist he had never once noticed. The doors opened again before he could speak. The Queen Consort came in. She came in fast and cold and already composed, because Verena or Doran had run to her the moment the gallery went wrong, and Morwenna had understood at once that the quiet way was lost, and that only the bold way remained. She swept into her husband's presence chamber with her chin high and her voice already sorrowing, a queen wronged. "My lord," she said, "I am glad you are here. There has been a dreadful business among the household. A copyist, that woman there, has been caught passing lies beyond the palace walls, feeding poison to your estranged son to turn him against us. I sent to have her questioned, and your sister has spirited her here with wild talk and armed her with slanders. I beg you, do not be taken in. She is a servant with a grievance and a gift for forgery, and she will say anything." "She copies documents, madam," the king said quietly, and something in his quiet stopped her. "You have just called her a gifted forger. How would you know the quality of her forgeries?" The room went silent. It was a small thing. It was one slip, one word too many, the kind of slip that only comes when a liar is moving too fast. But it hung in the air, and everyone in that chamber heard it, and Morwenna heard it herself, and I saw the instant she knew she had made it. She had come in to accuse Oriel of forgery, but the only forgery in this affair was the one Morwenna herself had ordered, and a woman does not fear a servant's forgeries unless she knows exactly what a forged document can do, because she has just had one made. "I misspoke," Morwenna said too smoothly. "I meant only—" "You meant," said King Alaric, and he rose now, and he held up the sheet in his hand, "that this document exists. This one. The reclassification of my late wife's jewels as household property, to be filed before the vault inventory, so that her jewels set aside for her own sons pass instead into your keeping, and no theft can ever be named. This document, madam, which this copyist has laid in my hand, and whose original your people are finishing for filing at this very hour. Will you tell me it does not exist? Shall I send a guard this instant to your circle to fetch the original and lay it beside this copy?" Morwenna said nothing, because there was nothing to say. If she denied it, the king would fetch the original and prove her a liar in front of the whole court. If she admitted it, she admitted the theft. She had walked into the one trap that even she could not talk her way out of, the trap of a truth that could be verified in 10 minutes by a man with the power to order it verified. All her years of stillness and cold cleverness could not move a stone she could not lift, and the king had just named a stone she could not lift. "Rook," the king said, not taking his eyes from his wife, "you are the guard who found this out." "I am, Majesty." "Then you will go now, with 2 men of my own guard, mine, not the household's, to the Queen Consort's correspondence circle, and you will take into your keeping every paper concerning my late wife's endowment, her codicil, and her jewels, and you will bring them here, and you will let no one of that circle burn, hide, or alter a single sheet. Go." I went. I will not stretch out that part of the telling, though there was drama enough in it, for I found the circle in disarray, and I found young Peveril already reaching for the forged original with a candle at hand, and I put my hand on his wrist and I said, "By the king's own order, that paper is his now, and if it so much as browns at a corner, you will answer to him for it." And the boy let go, and Aldous the old careful clerk stepped well back and folded his hands and had, as ever, no opinion. I gathered the papers, all of them, the endowment and the codicil and the jewels, and I brought them back to the king with 2 of his own guard walking the sheets between us as if they were the crown itself. And I laid them in his hands, and he set the originals beside Oriel's copies, and they matched, line for line, and the case was closed before it was ever opened. The judgment, when it came from the king and from no one else, which is as it must be, for a wrong done in a house is only truly righted when the head of the house names it a wrong. King Alaric did not rage. I think rage would have been easier for Morwenna to bear. He was quiet, and he was cold, and he was final. The schemes against the late queen's legacy were undone entire, the endowment restored to its purpose, the codicil exposed and burned, the jewels sealed in the vault to pass to Isolde's sons as she had willed, and Prince Cael's name, the estranged son, the one who had been driven out, spoken by his father for the first time in years, not as a bitter exile, but as the one who had received the truth and acted rightly upon it. Word was sent to Cael that night. What passed between father and son after is not mine to tell, for I was not there, but I am told that the door which had been closed between them for years was, from that night, no longer entirely shut. As for the Queen Consort, the king did not cast her out into the cold. A king cannot unmake a queen with a word, and there were matters of state and appearance that even a wronged husband must weigh. But her circle was broken up and scattered, her secretaries dismissed, her creature Doran turned out of the palace by nightfall with orders never to return, and her power over the household, the quiet, spreading power she had built for years, stripped from her and given into other, cleaner hands. She was a queen still in name, but everyone in that palace knew from that day that the king had seen her plainly at last, and that the seeing had changed everything, and that whatever she reached for now, there would be eyes upon her hand. Lady Verena, who had stood aside in the gallery, kept her own position by the narrowest margin and the coldest calculation, and served thereafter with a caution she had never shown before, for she had learned that the Queen Consort's favor was no shield against the king's justice. But the part of that day I hold dearest is none of the great matters. It is a small thing that happened at the very end, and it is the reason I have told this whole story at all. When the papers were gathered and the judgment given and the room beginning to empty, King Alaric turned to Mistress Oriel, who had stood the whole while in her plain gray dress at the edge of it all, invisible even here, waiting to be forgotten again as she had always been forgotten. And the king crossed the room to her, the king, to the copyist, and he took her tireless hands in both of his own. "My first wife," he said, "asked you to be her witness. You kept that promise for years, alone in fear for no reward against the whole weight of this house. There is not a lord in my kingdom who has served me half so well. What she saw in you, madam, I was too blind to see, and I am ashamed of it, and I will not be blind to it again." He straightened. "You will not copy papers in a back room any longer. You will hold a place of honor in this household in your own name, and you will answer to no one but the crown, and every soul in this court will know what you did and why. The furniture," he said, and here his voice was rough, "will be furniture no more." Mistress Oriel wept then, the only time in the whole affair I saw her weep, not for fear now, but because after 30 years of being no one, her king had taken her hands and called her by her name. And Prince Cael, in the county where he lived, would learn that night who his mystery informant had been, and would send her a letter of his own, in his own hand, the first letter in that whole business to go the other way, thanking the woman who had kept faith with his mother when the whole shining court had not. I stood my post by the door through all of it, as a guard should, and I said nothing, as a guard should. But I will tell you what I felt, since it is the end of my part in this. I had been ordered, weeks before, to guard a person I had not met and could not name. I had found her, and I had learned in finding her that the bravest soul in that whole gilded palace was the one no one ever looked at, a plain woman with tireless hands, who had stopped nothing and dared everything, who had held to a dying woman's request across years of silence when every lord who bowed in those halls would not have crossed a room for it. The powerful had schemed, and the powerful had fallen. But it was the invisible one who had brought the truth to light, and it was right. It was the most right thing I have ever been part of, that in the end it was her name, and not the Queen Consort's, that the court would remember. Prince Cael's mystery informant had been hidden, all along, in plain sight inside the Queen Consort's own trusted circle, a copyist called Oriel, who kept a promise to a dead queen. I was only the man who found her. But of all the doors I have stood in 14 years of standing doors, I am proudest of the one I stood that day, between a brave woman and those who would have destroyed her, until her king could see her plainly, and thank her, and set her free of the shadows for good. That is the whole of it. That is how the truth came out of the dark, carried the last of the way by a copyist's tireless hands and a guardsman who was only doing his duty, which is, in the end, the only kind of hero this house has ever truly had.